Welcome in, college football fans. It's that time again. You're tuned into the right spot for some college football. Mason, how are you today, buddy? We are on our countdown to kickoff, counting off our teams that are the most relevant in 2024, teams that are most intriguing to us. How are you today, man?
Doing good, man. Ready to talk some Kansas State football. One of my favorite teams in the Big 12, one of my favorite teams in general. Um, this should be a very exciting season for Kansas State. Look, Wildcats fans, if you win, you're in, right? This is the first time, that you get an automatic bid if you win the Big 12. And the Big 12 just got a lot easier with Texas and Oklahoma moving over to the SEC. Of course, you do bring in a ton of teams, but I think that there's a noticeable drop off in talent between Oklahoma, Texas, and the four teams that come over. So I'm really excited for this season. I'm excited for Kansas State. I think it could be a special season for this team, and ready to break it down with you, Mark.
Yeah, and if this is your first time tuning into the First and Long College Football Show, we hope that you'll consider hitting that subscribe button. If you're a Kansas State fan or just a college football fan in general, we'd love to have you come hang out in our little community that we're building on our YouTube channel. We've been doing this going on a couple years now, and really got some stuff in store for you guys this season. We're gonna have tons of live shows, um, predictions, the analytics stuff, all the stats that you're gonna want to have with you when you go to the water cooler and you're talking college football with all your family and coworkers and all that good stuff. So we would love to have you. And yeah, Mason, this team makes their, they're going to make their move in 2024. Kansas State feels like they've got just as good a shot as anybody to win the Big 12. You got those new teams coming in. What has left the conference versus what has came in? I think you're absolutely correct. It's not of equal talent or equal ability. Oklahoma, as we know, has dominated the Big 12 over really the last 10 to 15 years. And Texas has had a couple of high moments, but didn't really win the conference until last year. But they're gone now, and Kansas State, Utah, some of those powers over there in the Big 12 are going to have to fight it out. And what I think is going to be one of the most competitive conferences in college football in 2024. Mason, let's dive into it. And everybody, this is kind of how we do it. We're going to talk about the offense first. We always go offense first, and then we talk about the defense. And we've got our as Uncle Lou would call our copious notes ready to go. We got tons of them, and we looked at what happened last year. We're looking at what's going on in recruiting, who's coming back, the changes in coaching positions, and all that good stuff. And then we're going to take a look at the 2024 schedule here at the end of this video. Mason and I are going to make our predictions game by game on how we think it's going to go in the 2024 season. So y'all come on, let's talk some Kansas State football. Let's go and jump in to the offense first. Mason, it was we got to paint a picture for 2020. It was a 9-4 season, 6-3 in conference. You get a bowl game win in the infamous Pop Tart Bowl. That's right, Pop Tarts. But for all intents and purposes, Mason, it was a good season. A lot of changing has went on since then. Offensively, we'll kind of stick with offense first. 4 out of 11 starters returning in 2024 versus 2023. So definitely got a changing of the garb going on. But no position more important than the quarterback position. You got Avery Johnson taking over for Will Howard in that offense. And oh, by the way, you've got a new offensive coordinator, Connor Riley, who was the offensive line coach last year. So you promote from within, but you lose your coach to Colin Klein over to Texas A&M, right? So there's going to be some changes on this offense. I think it's going to be important this year for the defense to come out firing and give this offense a chance to build up some continuity. But once it does, I think it's going to be a pretty decent offense amongst Big 12 competitors. What do you think about what we saw last year headed into this year? And let's kind of just talk about Avery Johnson and what we expect out of him in the 2024 season.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a pretty successful season last year. Top 25 overall as an offense, and I think going into this season, you're hoping to see better receiving play, fewer drops. I think that was a huge issue last year for this team, no matter who was playing quarterback. And then also, you've got to be really excited about the man on your screen, Avery Johnson. I think that this is the best quarterback that Kansas State has had in a while, as far as ceiling and potential. Obviously, we have to see that realized. He was a true freshman last year, so it's really tough to gauge what he will be. Uh, in one season and a limited season at that. So I was really encouraged by what I saw from Avery Johnson towards the end of the year, where he really started splitting reps with Will Howard, as Will Howard was a little bit banged up towards the end of the season. And I think that you've got a dynamic playmaker in the run game, first of all. Developing in the passing game, yes, but every freshman quarterback is developing in the passing game. So it's, he's on schedule. There's nothing wrong with his game at all, and just super excited to see a full season with him coming up. And I think that's kind of the headlining story of this group. As we transition from 23 to 24, I think that Avery Johnson is sort of the headline of the season upcoming.
Yeah, Mason. Avery Johnson adds a couple of different elements to the game for Kansas State. I felt like Will Howard, the more I watched of him last year, the more I realized that it seemed like pushing the ball down the field was a little bit of an issue. Now, I know you just spoke of the wide receiver woes, and this was a team that was top 20 or bottom 20, I guess, however you want to look at it, in drop passes last year. So that certainly doesn't help, but I'm interested to see how Avery Johnson is able to push the ball down the field. I like the guy's deep ball. I think it's gonna work out well with this group of receivers they got. Where I don't think there's like a ton of depth in the receiver room, like top level talent depth, but I feel like those first 3 or 4 guys up are pretty doggone good. Let's talk about the running backs for a minute before we get over there into the wide receivers, though. As you can see on your screen at the top there at Portal Editions, Dylan Edwards makes his way over from Colorado. 76 attempts, 321 yards, and a touchdown. Um, those numbers are not like staggering, Mason, but you've got to understand, if you watched Colorado football last year, you understand that this was an offensive line that could not do anything. They couldn't stop a nosebleed. I mean, it was really bad. Like 50 sacks given up, couldn't run the football. Honestly, it was open season on the running backs for Colorado last year. So those numbers are not like, they don't knock you off your feet, but one statistic that really will knock you off your feet with Dylan Edwards is 36 receptions, 299 yards, and 4 touchdowns in that offense last year. Those are some really good numbers. He can receive the ball well coming out of the backfield. 8 carries of 10-plus yards last year. I feel really good about Dylan Edwards moving over. I feel like he made a good business decision here, Mason. And then, of course, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the great DJ Giddens. 223 carries. Holy cow. What a workhorse. 1,226 yards, 10 touchdowns, 727 yards after contact last season, guys. 69 missed tackles forced. I would say that those are video game numbers, except I'm not sure that I could do that on a video game,
Yeah, right.
especially the one that just came out, because it's hard as hell.
Yeah.
Um, what what do you think about the running back room? I won't even go beyond the 1-2 punch there. I love this 1-2 punch. I think this is a really good, nice lightning thunder combo. I'm super excited for this. It's going to obviously depend on how the offensive line blocks for these guys, Mason, but we'll get to that in a minute. What do you think about the prospect of these two really good running backs being a nice tandem in Manhattan, Kansas this year?
Yeah, well, first I do want to say, outside of the other two, just a quick mention, you do have Joe Jackson kind of behind them, who, was there last year, didn't get a ton of playing time, but
Yep.
is in his second year there, and also an early enrollee, Devin Rice, who apparently made some buzz this offseason. So he's had some good camp days. But yeah, speaking about Dylan Edwards, like you said, came over from Colorado. We talked about the stats. He was a guy who was really impressive as a true freshman last year. Early on, I mean, looked like a really strong running back when everybody was paying attention to Colorado. We noticed Dylan Edwards. He kind of made a name for himself then, and then they get a change in offensive coordinator. Potentially some stat padding for Shedeur Sanders, and you see them move away from the running game. Obviously they didn't have any offensive line up front to block for your running back. So you saw a dip in his numbers there, but this is a guy who I feel extremely confident in being able to run in between the tackles. I know people are saying he's undersized. You're not going to see a ton of that. I feel pretty good about him running between the tackles. I think he just did not have the offensive line to do it with at Colorado. I think you put the right pieces in front of him, and he's going to be fine in between the tackles. And then obviously what he's able to do in the passing attack is adds to his game, right? It's really similar to what DJ Giddens does, actually, except I would say DJ Giddens is a little bit more downhill of a running back. 223 attempts, like you said, over 1,200 yards, but also does it in the passing game as well. 323 receiving yards last year and 3 touchdowns as well. So another, really good running back who can do it on the ground and through the air. I mean, that's almost 1,600 yards in total offense. That's pretty elite right there. So if Kansas State can hold that and maybe even build on those sort of statistics, I think they're going to be in really good shape this year, and it's going to make the job for Avery Johnson that much easier. But it is important to note we've got a brand new offensive coordinator, so hopefully he's not changing things up too much as he was on the or a part of the coaching personnel last year. Maybe some of those terminologies and things will stay the same, but you don't need to fix the running game, right? There's no fixing Kansas State's running game. They really haven't skipped a beat very much since losing Deuce Vaughn. I think that they've maintained their success as a running attack type of team, and it's been really fun to watch. I think they're going to do really well this year too.
Let's talk about the wide receivers. Let's stick a pin in that run game because that is obviously going to be very crucial for this team this year, for any team, but especially Kansas State. And I feel like the running back room is in good shape. Let's talk about wide receivers, though, for just a minute. As you can see on your screen there, you return Jace Brown, 27 receptions, 437 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's good for 16.2 yards per reception in 2023. This, for all intents and purposes, is a guy that I feel like is the number one dude. I feel like he has that potential to be the go-to guy. Now, some people may argue that transfer Dante Cephas coming over from Penn State, coming originally from Kent State, somebody that you and I had talked about the other day, Mason. He was at Kent State in 2019 through 2022, and then last year at Penn State. He's got 167 receptions, 2,385 yards in his career. There's been some really good seasons for Dante Cephas. I believe it was 21 where he had 1,200 yards receiving. It was either 21 or 2, whichever season it was there at Kent State before all the coaching changes and everything happened over there. I like Dante Cephas. Obviously, the ceiling is high, but as we can see with some of the down production years he's had, maybe it was just Penn State's offense, Mason. We know Penn State's offense, that's kind of been a knock on it, that the explosivity of it is not where they need it to be. And maybe it was just not to the liking of Dante Cephas, or maybe he felt like he didn't get an opportunity in that offense. So he's going to be headed over to Manhattan this year. And I think that's a nice pickup. And he looks to start immediately. Keegan Johnson makes his return, 24 receptions, 227 yards, 2 touchdowns last year. And then you've got Jaden Jackson, who is going to be coming off the bench, Mason. He's got tons of experience. So those are kind of the 4 guys that I feel like, And I'll go ahead and throw Garrett Oakley in there. He's a tight end, not a wide receiver, but 11 receptions, 154 yards, an experienced guy that can kind of give you a backup plan, to Avery Johnson whenever you need it, or you would think maybe more of a red zone threat if they can get that installed this offseason. That would be very, very helpful for a young quarterback. What do you think about the wide receiver room? Jace Brown, Dante Cephas, Keegan Johnson. I think those are three pretty solid starters. Injuries could be an issue for this team, though. You get one or two of those guys down, especially if they're the right one or two. You might be in trouble a little bit. What's your thoughts, Mason?
Yeah, I'm definitely really big on those starting three guys. You're completely right. I feel like there's too much of an unknown beyond them to say that this is a really good unit or say it's a deep unit. We just don't know. I do feel pretty good about these three guys. I think that Jace Brown is your go-to receiver, and Dante Cephas should be better than he was last year. I don't know how he could get much worse because my gosh, it seemed like he was just there, taking snaps. I mean, I don't know. He was
It
just
looked like the
completely
Looney Tunes sucked all the ability out of him. That's what it
I
seemed
mean,
like last year.
yeah, yeah. Um, I don't really understand how he could have been that bad, but maybe he just needed a year to adjust. Maybe it was just the Penn State offense. Who knows? But I think that you're taking a shot on him, and I don't blame Kansas State for taking a shot on this guy. Considering what he did at Kent State, I think the big miss. What this team's really going to miss in the passing game is Ben Sinnott from last year. The tight end had over 600 yards, 676 yards on the year, and 6 touchdowns. Who's going to fill that void, right? That's a lot of yards to make up. It could be Jace Brown. It could be Garrett Oakley, who's taken over at the tight end position. But we're gonna have to wait and see. Could be Keegan Johnson. I mean, he didn't really blow the stat sheet up. Had 24 catches last year. So, where are those catches going to go? That's kind of my question. Jace Brown would be a really good option. I think really excited to see what he's going to do in year 2. But yeah, outside of that, I think there's just a lot of unknowns in this receiving and tight end group. I mean, if you know something about these guys, please let us know in the comments. But I don't have an answer for the depth beyond those 4 starters right there.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's talk offensive line, and we'll save those big uglies for last. We were talking about the ground game earlier, and keeping the ground game going and the rushing attack churning is ultimately going to come down to the performance of the offensive line. And they lost star guard Cooper Beebe and veteran tackle. He's at the left tackle. He was at the left tackle position, KT Leviston. But there are some returning pieces, Mason. Left tackle looks to be solidified by transfer Easton Kilty. Now, here's the deal. He was at North Dakota State, and he had a bunch of starts, Mason. 23 straight starts at both right guard and left guard. Okay, but he's going to be the left tackle. So I find that to be a little bit interesting. You do have an offensive tackle coming in through recruiting. You've got a 4-star guy, Gus Hawkins. I guess that's maybe like kind of a contingency plan a little bit. You've got a little bit of depth back behind him. I just find that interesting, Mason. He plays all those starts at guard, and then he slides over to tackle. We'll have to see how that works out. Former prize recruit Andrew Lingang, he steps in at left guard slot, and Carver Willis, he was kind of thrown into the fire, Mason, kind of thrown into the deep end, and was expected to tread water. He looks to build on a steady second half of 2023 at right tackle. You've got decisions to be made at center, at right guard. Taylor Portier, Hadley Panzer, and Sam Heck are going to battle it out. It looks to me like Hadley Panzer is going to be a guy that's going to be at center, Mason. 365 pass pro snaps, gave up 1 sack, 11 hurries in those 365. Really good stats on that guy. From what I'm understanding, he's going to be at the center position. I think this is a decent offensive line. I think, I don't think it's like top in the nation or top 5 in the nation or anything, but I think it's very serviceable, and I don't see anything that is overly concerning. What are your thoughts on this line, Mason?
Well, I'm kind of with you. I think that it's a line full of Jags. Maybe
Yeah.
Hadley Panzer to me is the highlight of the group. I think he's kind of that Jag plus. Maybe that whole center to left side is kind of a Jag plus, and then we got question marks at on the right side. Although I did like what Carver Willis did towards the end of the year. I mean, back half of the year, it seemed like he was really starting to figure things out. But and Hadley Panzer, I mean, he was a former top 100 recruit. And he's kind of showing that now. Or was last year, only giving up 1 sack, only giving up 11 hurries. I like that there's a battle going on at right guard because that tells me that there's a little bit of depth, whether it's Taylor Poitier or Sam Hecht, who ultimately wins that position. There's a 6 piece there that can play as a utility, and that's you always want 6 or really 7 offensive linemen that you can play, because you have to have contingency on the offensive line. You have to have the contingency to where at the end of the year, if all 5 of your starters are out, who's playing, right? Who's playing where? Because if your center goes down and let's say Sam Hecht steps in, right, to play center, well, Sam Hecht may be your right tackle if your right tackle's down, right? So now you got to have somebody to back up the center, your second center. And you see my point here. You can't just have 5 guys on the offensive line. You can't just have 6. You got to have 7, 8, maybe even 9 in some cases that can go out and play. I'm not sure that they have the depth to really play with some of the bigger teams in college football, but this should be serviceable for the Big 12 at the least.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a middle to upper side of the Big 12 conference offensive line here. I mean, I don't think that's crazy to say, Mason. I mean, there's no returning starters, right? So, I mean, what are we to take from that other than, there's work to do here. So, we'll see how that look. Kansas State seems to always figure out a way to do more with less. So I'm sure they will exceed our expectations. Let's jump over to the defense, Mason. Historically, over the last few years, this has been a good defense. But last year, I don't think most fans would say that was one of the best years they've ever seen as far as defensively. 57th in total defense in 2023. You've got a bunch of experience returning, though. Tons of those guys are back. 9 of 11 starters to be exact, and plenty of other contributors behind those guys. That's good for 79% returning production on the defense this year. This is, I think this is more of the strength of this team right now. The offense, I feel like, can certainly evolve into more of a strength, but the defense is the strength of this team right now, Mason. And it's obviously easy to see that whenever you've got that many starters coming back. But let's just go ahead and start with defensive line, because I feel like that is the most important position. Maybe not just on defense, maybe all of college football. That might be the most important position, honestly. I got to mention Yuso Sumalo. That's going to be essentially in this defense your nose tackle, right? Or I guess you could consider him a D tackle, whatever you want to call him. He's the guy that's doing all the dirty work. He's the guy that's not getting the stats, not getting the recognition. And I say not getting stats, 18 tackles. I think Yuso Sumalo is going to be a really big piece, a really big anchor to this defensive line. You've got Cody Stufflebean going to be at one of the end positions or defensive line positions. I guess weak side defensive end, I guess that would be. Anyway, he's going to be he's going to be your go-to guy there. 19 tackles, 2 sacks, a forced fumble. He's a nice piece to bring back. And probably the most important piece, or one of the most important pieces, is Brendan Mott. One of the most productive pieces, I guess I should say. 27 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, a sack, 2 pass deflections last year. I feel like this guy is pretty doggone good at what he does, Mason. And for all intents and purposes, I think those are 3 good starters. You got Chidi Obiozar, Toby Asunami, Damian Lalio, those are all guys that are going to kind of rotate in on that defensive line, and all guys that have some experience, right? So I feel pretty good about the defensive line. Considering they play that 3-3-5 stuff, I think they're in pretty good shape for those 3 spots on the defensive line. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's another group of Jags, right? Just the guys. Nose tackle, I think I feel pretty good about Uso Siamalu.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to say it with confidence and trust that I just pronounced that correctly. But I feel confident about him at nose tackle, right? And he's kind of just a space eater right there in the middle. Plays the run pretty well. So I like him in the middle. I think it's important to notice that they only play 3 down linemen, right? So you kind of mask some of the deficiencies of the linemen with having 3 linebackers to back them up, and some will come up and play the line, and kind of give some different looks that way. But it's not a strong defensive line. It's not a deep defensive line. It's an average defensive line, right? Which might be enough. But I think Brendan Mott, like you said, has all the experience, more than 1,000 career snaps at the end position, but kind of lacks that disruptiveness, that those havoc plays. I think having that many snaps and then, last year only having 4.5 tackles for a loss and a sack. I mean, I'd like to see him get to the quarterback a little bit more than that. Maybe somebody who can get to the quarterback a little bit more is Toby Usansami. I think he's kind of a guy who may have a little bit more of that speed off the edge, and we may see him in some situations being told to just go get the quarterback. But a pretty average group. Honestly, I expected before we did this breakdown to see a little bit more potential out of this group, and maybe there is some potential that I'm just not seeing. Let me know in the comments if there is, because honestly, we learn a lot from you guys about your teams. We're the Georgia fans looking in, right? So tell us if we're missing something here, but I'm not seeing a ton of production and a ton of potential out of the defensive line group, and maybe that's not an issue. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, Mason, I know you and I are aligned on the thinking that defensive line is if not the most important position for any football team, it's one of the most. And you're right, this 3-3-5, it is kind of designed to kind of mask some of those deficiencies. One guy that we didn't mention, Travis Bates, he comes over from Austin P. We'll see, what that translates to. I don't know, I don't know what playing at Austin P means for playing at Kansas State. It's got to mean something, but I'm not sure exactly the weight that I can put with that. Let's talk about the linebacker room. You return a star in Austin Moore, 63 tackles, 12.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. He had 28 run stops last year. That's what you're looking for out of your linebacker. And, one stat that really stuck out to me, Mason, was his tackles. They averaged 1.5 yards of depth past the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
And so you've got a linebacker playing on their toes, coming downhill. That's usually a good sign of a sure run stop and tackler. I really like this guy. And you bring back Desmond Purnell. He is a linebacker / edge guy, like a strong side edge linebacker. 51 tackles, 4.5 TFLs, 1 interception, 2 pass deflections. Those are a couple of really good ones there that I really like. You got Jake Clifton, Austin Romaine, a couple of dudes battling for that middle linebacker spot. So you'll have, I guess, Desmond Purnell will be the strong side guy that sometimes lines up down there on the line, and I'm guessing Austin Moore will kind of be like that inside linebacker, but the one that's on the outside, right? And then Clifton and Romaine will battle out that middle spot there. You also got Asa Newsom and Rex Van Wayne. They'll be rotational pieces as well. Feel pretty decent. Actually, I probably feel a little better about linebacker room than I do the defensive line, just to be honest with you. I feel pretty good about this group. defensive line might be the weakness of this defense, Mason. The more I look at it, sometimes we will do these videos, and I literally learn stuff while we're doing the videos. And the more I look at this, it seems like linebacker is kind of a strength for this defense. What do you think?
Yeah. I agree. I really like the linebacking position. And we'll get into the DBs here in a minute, but I think we're getting better as we get further from the football, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a thing, right? It doesn't mean that this defense is going to fail or anything like that. Like I said, the good thing about having and it's not a bad defensive line. It's an average defensive line. I would like to see more top end talent on the defensive front for a team that we're picking to win the conference potentially, right? That's what I mean by an average unit, right? But they do get better in this front seven or front six, I guess you could say, with the three linebackers, excuse me, that they have in Austin Moore. I don't know much about Alec Marenko coming over from New Mexico. He's a transfer coming in. Hey, he's transferring in and he's starting, right? That's probably a pretty good sign. And then Desmond Purnell, I really like 51 tackles, 4.5 tackles for a loss, half a sack last year. You know, I feel confident that these three right here are going to play really well. And I feel confident that there's three behind them that can play with very little drop off. And that's what I'm looking for on the defensive side of the football more specifically than the offensive side. This is a physical side of the ball, and you need to have some depth, especially in the front seven. And I think that we're seeing some depth here at the linebacking position.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. Let's go over to the secondary, Mason, and then everybody, we will jump into the 2024 schedule and give you our predictions for the year. And I'd love to hear you guys' predictions as well. I hope that you'll put that in the comment section. Please and thank you. Let's start off with the corners, Mason. You got Keenan Garber. He's making his return, I believe.
Yep.
And
He's
then
got some experience, yeah.
And then you've got Jacob Parrish. That's the star of the cornerbacks anyway. 44 tackles, 4 interceptions, 9 pass breakups, 50% completion when targeted is Jacob Parrish. Those are good numbers. I feel good about the top 2 guys, Mason. This was a defense last year that we talked about it earlier. It wasn't great. Secondary needed to improve. I like the pieces they've got. I really like the pieces they've got at safety. Those 2 starting guys at corner, though, are good. Not sure about the backups. What do you think about those corners?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that they're not necessarily 2 lockdown corners. I do really like Jacob Parrish, though. He's pretty much locked down. Keenan Garber's a Jag plus, right? Gives you some different looks, gives you some experience there, but probably not like a future NFL guy if I had to put some money on it. But serviceable. Like he's going to do well in the Big 12. And then behind them, it's kind of, we just don't know, right? There's crickets. We just don't know what's going to happen behind really this whole unit here. Not a ton of depth in the secondary from my research at least. But yeah, those 2, I feel really good about it. If those are the 2 that are playing for most of this.
Jordan Dunbar does come in from Rice. He's got 56 tackles, 19 pass deflections. Those are career stats, not last year. That would be insane, right? But yeah, Tyler Nalome. You've got James Justice. Those are a couple of the backups among the cornerback room there with Jordan Dunbar. We'll see how that shakes out. I mean, there you got a few names there. You got 2 good starters. You got 3 backups. I don't know a ton about the backups. If you do, let us know in the comment section. I'd like to know more because I do watch a lot of Kansas State football every year. So would love to know what your thoughts are on that.
I will say, Tyler Nalome and Justice James, they're both seniors coming over. So
yeah,
you do have some experience there, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that means a little something, and who knows? Maybe one of these guys takes over in fall camp. I mean, you never know.
That would be welcomed. Let's talk about the safeties. At free safety, Marquez Siegel, 63 tackles, 9 pass breakups. He led the team in tackles and pass breakups last year. Obviously, anytime you can bring back your leading tackler on defense, that's going to be a massive, massive help. VJ Payne is a guy to keep your eye on, folks. I got a star beside his name, and I got it for a reason. Certainly a top 5 player on this team, maybe one of the best players on this team. 57 tackles, 1 interception, 3 pass breakups last year. He'll be at that strong safety spot. 11% missed tackle rate last year. 16 run stops. That was good for third on the team. A lot of team accolades for that guy last year. I feel really, really good about your free safety and strong safety. You're at least your starting guys, right? And then you're going to bring in a guy, Jordan Riley Scott. He comes over from Ball State. Tons of experience, Mason, he has over there at Ball State. We'll see how it translates to, Power 4 football, right? I feel good about the safeties, though. I think you got a couple of real good ones. If you can keep them healthy, that will be a really, really, really big deal. You got Wesley Fair, Kobe McAllister back behind those guys. But the starters are starters for reasons, Mason, in this case. And you're going to need them to stay healthy. But if they do, watch out. Going to be some really good talent on the back end.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at a position group as a whole, and you can single it down to safeties if you want, because this team kind of plays with 3 safeties, which is a bit unique. But the DB room as a whole, I think is maybe outside of the running backs, the best unit on the team. They're up there for sure, but those 5 have got to stay healthy because there's not much. There's a pretty big drop off from those 5 to the next group behind them. So I'm a little worried if 2 of these guys go down. I'm a little bit worried about the season trajectory. I think you can get away with 1, depending on which one it is, right? If VJ Payne goes down, I think that's a terrible loss for this defense. Same thing with Siegel. Really, it Parrish too. Like all 3 of those guys, I think you kind of have to have them on the field for the most part. So much production out of those 3. And then, Jordan Riley coming over from Ball State. You mentioned the experience. Well, last year had 61 tackles, 3 tackles for a loss, and 8 pass breakups. Really productive season for him last year. He gets the kind of the call up to AAA in a sense, right? And now he's going to get a shot in the Big 12, and I think he's going to do really well. That's really tough to do, but I like this. I like this group. I like what Riley does. 61 tackles last year. He's playing the run pretty well. I don't have run specific stats on him, but if you're getting 61 tackles, you're playing the run pretty well at the safety position. Same thing with VJ Payne. 57 tackles. He had 16 run stops, which is really good for a safety. Shows his versatility there, along with the pass breakups and whatnot. And then Siegel comes down. He had 8 run stops, which isn't bad, but plays the pass really well. So a lot of versatility at those 3 positions there in the safety room. You have to like what you get out of those 3 players. If Jordan Riley hits, which I think he will. But yeah, I think, is he Kobe Savage, right? He's the DB that Kansas State lost. No, I don't think he's Kobe Savage. You don't really replace a Kobe Savage on this in the secondary here. But I do really like the pieces that they have, and I really like the defense as a whole. I think a lot of returning production, right? And I think that this is going to be the better unit of the bunch this year, more than likely, depending on just how much of a step forward that this offense takes, and what Avery Johnson takes really as a step forward. But yeah, I think that would be welcome given what the defense did last year. It was a little bit disappointing, but for them to get better as a whole, I think that Kansas State's going to be really happy with what they see on the field.
Yep. Let's jump into the 2024 schedule, man, and let's talk about what we got going on this season. It's an all new conference schedule with the addition of these other teams coming in. You start off the season with UT Martin, you get you a dub there. Then you've got Tulane. And Mason, we haven't done a deep dive into Tulane, but they were pretty good quarterback there at the end of the year. That's a game that you're going to be playing at Tulane, which, folks, I don't understand why you do that. I can't figure out. I try to figure out why a big name like Kansas State would go, give a home game to a Tulane. But with all that being said, you got to watch out in that game, man. That's going to be. It might be a tough game. I don't know. I don't know a ton about Tulane. You'll have to go check them out. But like I said, they were a good squad last year. Wouldn't be surprised if they didn't have some holdover talent there. September 14th, you're going to host Arizona. And so you don't have to wait long to get one of these Big 12 matchups from an ex-Pac-12 program. And Arizona's good. Jed Fish left the cupboard full over there at Arizona. So that's going to be a really tough game. BYU is down in the dumps. You're going to go to their place. Sometimes that can be a raucous environment. I don't think that's going to be a problem at all. And then you've got Oklahoma State, September 28th. So, guys, if you're counting, there's no off week, in those first 5 weeks until in between the Oklahoma State and Colorado games. So, gonna have to hit the ground running. And as we said earlier in the video, the defense is the one's going to have to carry the boats, right? So I'm thinking the defense is going to have to carry the boats while the offense figures out what they're doing and what their identity is going to be. But going back to the schedule, Oklahoma State that you're hosting at home there on September 28th, that's going to be a hell of a game, Mason. Oklahoma State, that's one of the oldest, if not the oldest, team in college football history. Just tons of super seniors on this team, all over that offensive line. The defensive line is going to be tested for Kansas State that day. You got Colorado at their place. Folks, I'm not high on Colorado, okay? I'm just not. I feel like Kansas State will have a clear advantage in the lines of scrimmage in that game, barring a miracle from Shedeur Sanders and company. I'm thinking, and by a miracle, I mean like a really good day where he just can't miss or something. I think you're good there. West Virginia, October 19th. Kansas, October 26th. You got Kansas at home. Those are a couple of tough games back-to-back, Mason. You got to go to Morgantown and then host Kansas, which is obviously a rivalry game, right? In-state rivals there. You got to watch out, man. You got to watch out. You start looking forward to a rivalry game. West Virginia at their place is going to be really tough for this team with a rivalry game, looming that following week. So Houston at their place, Arizona State at home, Cincinnati at home, and then end the year against Iowa State at home, which will be a tough game as well. Mason, as far as Big 12 schedules go, I think this is the hardest one I've seen. Yeah. I don't think it's anywhere really close. I believe this is the hardest one I've seen. You've got Arizona, Oklahoma State, Kansas. The only one that you're missing out on really that is a contender is Utah. And, Utah, we just did a breakdown on them, guys. If you hadn't seen it, go check it out. That's a possible team that you could meet up with in the Big 12 Championship. They got a pretty decent squad. Again, surprise, surprise, right? Down year last year, but they're always pretty good other than that. This is the hardest schedule I've seen in the Big 12. And I wonder about the depth of this team, Mason. We'll see how it works out for them. It only gets you don't have a Texas or Oklahoma, so yeah, we lost some top end talent, but you play all the dogs. What do you think about this?
I agree with you. I mean, we're breaking down the schedule, and I'm thinking I have not seen a Big 12 schedule that looked this demanding. I mean,
Yeah.
there's some really tough matchups here.
And
I'm looking at it.
The timings of the matchups are hard too.
Yeah, and the home games and away games. I mean, it's pretty funky for sure. So yeah, man, I'm looking at this and I'm scratching my head about Tulane because I saw them play Ole Miss really tough last year, up to the last drive, and
Yeah.
last year's team's not this year's team, but We're not gonna have time to do a breakdown of Tulane, but I'll be very interested come week 2 to see kind of how that game's going. I'll have that sort of on the back burner whenever it's comes on September 7th. But Arizona, I'm not really big on Arizona this year. I've seen them ranked as high as like a top 25 team. I don't think that they're going to be that. Yes, that they have the players there. They keep their quarterback. They keep McMillan at receiver, which were their 1 and 2 playmakers there. Did lose some to when Jed Fish went over to Washington. There were a few transfers that went with him, a few that went elsewhere. But ultimately, you're right. They retain a lot of their main players. But I think that with Arizona, they were really led by their head coach more so than the quarterback and the wide receiver. I think that he was a phenomenal or is a phenomenal play caller, and that's going to be a tough loss for Arizona. I've got that as a win for Kansas State. I've got BYU as a win for Kansas State, although we keep just glazing over BYU in all these breakdowns. They're gonna upset somebody, right? Probably not going to be Kansas State, but if you catch their hand in the cookie jar and they're looking ahead to getting back home and playing Oklahoma State, it could be an issue there. I've got Oklahoma State, and here's where the schedule gets tricky. I've got Oklahoma State, Colorado, West Virginia, and Kansas all as 50-50 games, like kind of toss-ups. I would give Kansas State a slight edge in all those games, but I think that Oklahoma State and Kansas are the two best teams out of those. You get those at home, which helps, right? Then you got to go to Colorado, which isn't a tough environment, but it is an away game at the end of the day, and to West Virginia. Your two of your easier opponents of those 4. There is one bye in that stretch, which is in between Oklahoma State and Colorado. Folks, that's a really tough. That's a really tough stretch right there. I think you're going to go 2-2 out of those. I'm not smart enough to pick which 2 you lose to. If I had to guess, I'd say you're going to lose to Oklahoma State and Kansas. I do feel like Kansas is going to have somewhat of a bounce back year, especially if Jalen Daniels is able to stay healthy this year. But West Virginia is more than capable of beating you. Colorado is more than capable of beating you if the dominoes fall in the right way. And then outside of that, the only other game that I'm circling is Iowa State. I think that Iowa State's kind of a dark horse, forgotten team of the Big 12. And if you recall, their quarterback was pretty dang good last year as a true freshman. So wouldn't be surprised to see them putting up some gaudy numbers on the offensive side of the football, and a pretty good defensive line, if I recall, from last year as well. Not sure who they're returning, but I feel pretty comfortable in saying that at least today that Kansas State's going to win that game, but Iowa State's one to watch kind of throughout the season to see how that goes, how their season goes, and then that may affect my opinion of the game come week 14 at the end of the season. But yeah, for me that's a 10-2 season for the Kansas State Wildcats, and at 10-2, I think that puts them. For me, facing Utah in the Big 12 by the end of the season.
That'd be the perfect championship too, because we haven't it wouldn't be a rematch, so that's cool. Because you know what, guys, we're about to go into an era where it's possible for teams to play 3 times in a year, and it's going to happen. It might happen this year. It really could. Georgia could play Alabama 3 times this year. Georgia could play Texas 3 times this year, right?
Or Ole Miss.
Or Ole Miss, it's going to happen. There's too much probability it's going to happen. Mason, I came to the same conclusion. I'm 10-2 with you. I think West Virginia is a loss, and I think Iowa State's a loss, and I think it has to do a lot with where they end up on the schedule. I'll start with the first one. West Virginia, that's a look ahead game, man. That's a trap game if I've ever seen one. You got to go from Colorado to West Virginia, right? Not really super easy travels either way. I guess Kansas is kind of close to Colorado. Don't ask a Georgia boy for national directions. But you got to go to Colorado, and then you've got to go to West Virginia the week before you play Kansas. and there's no bye week in there, man. So you will have a bye week right before the Colorado game, but I think the timing is really tough on that game, and I think West Virginia is a pesky team, and you never know when their quarterback, Mr. Green, is going to show up and light up the ball down the field, man. You just don't know. He's kind of inconsistent, but when he's on, he's on. And then Iowa State is kind of simple, guys. Most college football teams lose a game they're not supposed to. So me saying that Iowa State is going to beat Kansas State doesn't mean that I think Iowa State's going to be better in 2024, because I actually don't. But the where this sets up, the fact that it's a road game at Iowa State, I think Iowa State's going to be better this year. And Mason, it seems like a common trend with this team. I think they're a little thin, buddy. I think they're a little thin on starting talent. Pretty much, I think it's pretty common throughout the roster. And by the end of this season, guys are going to be banged up. I'm not saying Iowa State's obviously going to have guys banged up too, but I got to make my predictions, and that's one of them. So I'm picking 10-2, Mason, and I'm thinking that will probably be good to go to the Big 12 championship. We'll have to just wait and see. I think it's going to be a conference that could possibly have a 2 or 3 loss conference champion by the time it's all said and done. Going to be a really, really interesting time there in the Big 12. And all you Big 12 fans, Kansas State fans, all you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, we want you to come on back to the First and Long College Football Show. This was number 11 on our countdown to kickoff preview series. We're previewing all these teams headed all the way down to number 1. Who will it be? Georgia, Ohio State. We don't know yet. You'll just have to wait and see. But we hope that you'll hit the subscribe button so that you can follow along with us. And if you're a college football bettor, this is the show for you, because we're going to give you the stats. We're giving you the unbiased information. We're betting right alongside you. We're jumping in the window as well. So please come and join us for all our live shows, betting shows, all that good stuff. Like the content, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we will see you all next time. I'm signing out for Marcus and Mason and the First and Long College Football Show. Everybody have a great day.